Hello, this is Bruce from Record Collector's Paradise, and we are going to be doing a video today of part of a collection that we have just picked up. And we are at Record Collector's Paradise. We buy a lot of collections and a lot of big collections, and every once in a while we get one that I consider special, and I consider this collection special, and the reason being it was about a 4,600 album collection, but about 25% of those records, over 1,000 records, were vintage sealed. So what we're going to do, every record I am flipping now is a vintage sealed record, and it's quite common for us when we buy collections. You might find 2 or 3 or 5, or if we're really lucky, a bit more in sealed items. But to find this number of records is very unusual, and of course it makes us very happy, and hopefully it'll make our customers very happy. But most of this of these records are, in my opinion, from the late 70s and through the 80s. And so there would be a combination of new 80s issues and 80s reissues. But they were kept in spectacular condition. These were from an estate. And in my opinion, I think this gentleman was more of a collector as opposed to a listener. And with 25% of his records being sealed, I would say that at least another 25% were in shrink and had no obvious signs of ever being played. So the condition was spectacular. The fact that it was from the 80s makes it special. And we traveled about 4 hours or so to look at this stuff. And when we were traveling down, I said to Andrew that we were long due for a nice 80s collection. And and they are very scarce. It's tough to find stuff from the 80s, mainly because CDs had found their way into the marketplace and it had taken over. And even cassettes were by far outselling records by the mid-80s. So the record albums basically took their spot in the back corner of the record stores, and most of the record stores at that time were featuring CDs and cassettes. So it's nice to see something like this surface. I'm sure there's more out there somewhere, but stuff like this, like I said, is just really hard, and it makes us very excited at the store to find these type of records in this type of condition. I personally love hype stickers, price tags. Even when we get a collection in that just has shrink-wrapped records with hype stickers, it's exciting, and I'm almost feeling now like I'm back in about 1986, flipping through these. I feel history in my fingertips going through these records. And a lot of these records I didn't even know. Myself and Andrew were going through them, and for us to see records that we don't recognize just because they were small obscurities from the late 80s, it's very satisfying.
Yeah, Bruce has been collecting records obviously for much longer than I have, but working at this store for the past 7-8 years, especially working in the warehouse, I've been pretty privy to seeing a lot of records. And you get a sense just from visual memory of what's common, what's not, and what you just never see. And there's a lot of stuff here I've never seen before, almost never heard of before, never mind not opened since the 70s or 80s or even the 90s. It's pretty astonishing, and we're pretty glad to be able to bring this to our customers, both old and new.
Absolutely. We have a little ongoing joke in the store that as soon as we talk about something and start complaining that we never see it, then it somehow finds its way in, or finds its way to us within a short period of time.
They call that manifestation.
We have some manifestation going on. But what I'm going to do is I will flip through all of these vintage records we have, and I said there's probably, I think there might be even over 1,100 of these sealed records, so I'm going to go pretty quick, but trust me, I'm enjoying every single flip of this, and it was equally as exciting. I remember looking through the collection. I had no idea that there was even one sealed record in this collection. The gentleman that was running the estate, he just told me there was lots of rock and pop records, and that was about it. He sent me some blurry pictures, so I could hardly make anything out, just pictures of the spines. So I really didn't know what I was walking into. I thought I was probably just walking into another, basic rock and pop collection. And as I started, very shortly after I started going through it, I knew we had something special here.
As if we don't already deal with enough special things they're almost like miracles when they come through our doors. But this kind of proves that there's still plenty miracles to be found out there.
Well, we've been open now almost 9 years at our brick and mortar store, and it's been really steady, and we've had great luck with people bringing us great records. I think that's we have the reputation for having them. And we try to treat everybody well when they come in and sell us stuff. So I think the word gets around, and that's exactly what happened in this situation. It was somebody from another province, and he heard about us through word of mouth, and checked us out, checked our reviews, and felt like that he could trust us with this, and we were very happy, and he was very happy. So it was well worth the long drive and carrying a bunch of records upstairs. These were nice and clean. Quite often it's not the case. And most of these, you can see, are somewhat in alphabetical order. We've had to do some rearranging. He had his stuff actually with the first names as an alphabetized, so and I always go by last name, so we were shuffling stuff around, and there was still, besides these sealed records, there's still another 3/4 of the collection that is set aside, and they're equally as great records. Like I said, a lot of these other records are still in shrink, and he may have just played them once, possibly. He didn't have much of a stereo system, so it for what he owned didn't really match what he had in stereo gear. So, and judging by the condition of the records, it just did not appear that he played his records very often, if at all.
It's kind of what you would call an archive collection.
Absolutely. When it comes to condition, you will be hard pressed to find better condition records than any of these. You want to find that record, I dare you to find a better one. And I love the prices on them. And Eaton's, they've not been around for a while, so I really get a thrill out of even seeing old price stickers and so on. Just adds to the nostalgia of these records.
Getting into vinyl it's a time machine in more ways than one.
The music, the art, and even the plastic and the stickers.
You're seeing a fair amount of 12-inch singles in here as well, which spoke to the type of collector this fellow was as well.
Yes, and then all of the 12-inch singles that would still look like they hadn't been opened or played. A lot of them were sealed with so-called Scotch tape, and that's the way they were done in the factory. But just by looking at the Scotch tape itself, you can tell that it was never removed off the record itself, so that record was never touched by human hands. And like I was saying, these are an interesting thing, these Zeppelin reissues, 1, 2, and 3. These, I asked my guys yesterday to pull out the top 150 records that we could start featuring, and those didn't make the top 150, if you can believe that. But these records are mainly alphabetical, and towards the end there's will be a mishmash of some various other genres, as well as some of the stuff we were pulling for our features. So as much as these are alphabetical, especially down towards our last roll or two, you will see some of the stuff that's been pulled, which will be offered over the next 4 or 5 weekends. I've never seen, for instance, that hype sticker on a good Canadian artist. I think one day that hype stickers and sealed records like this will be considered collectible and maybe, considered in the same categories as tickets, like concert tickets or sports tickets, which are very popular right now, and even just sports cards. That condition and grading and original condition is all going to start to mean a lot more in the future.
At the very least, it's kind of holy grail material for someone who's a massive fan of a given artist. It's not tough to find your favorite album on vinyl one way or another, but to find an original, say, 80's copy, never been opened, and has that special hype sticker with the artist's logo and talking about the hit singles and maybe mentioning that they're on tour that year, that's an era of collectibility that a person shouldn't really take for granted. We certainly did back in the day when we would rip the shrink wrap off and just throw these things out, but it's pretty special now.
And like I mentioned as well, the records we're flipping through, many of these, we rarely ever see them in any condition, be it opened, in rough condition. They're just tough to find, like, period, in any condition. And we're looking at these things the way they were in 1988 or 1986, 1990. I love, especially hype stickers on these ones, the records that never had titles on them. Pink Floyd and Zeppelin, or a few other bands are known to pull that nonsense off. I'm definitely having fun just looking at these records. In this collection, he was a big fan of certain artists like the Beatles, Rolling Stones especially, or some of the other ones after that he was heavy on.
Crosby, Stills and Nash, and the various side projects there.
There was several other, Queen, I think he was pretty heavy on. Some of the Canadian artists.
So and along those lines, if you're watching this, keep in mind this is only the sealed items from the collection. So this is a fraction. Like we passed by the Queen records just a couple bins ago. He's got way more than that in open condition.
I think the stuff that, of course, he liked the best was probably the stuff that ended up being open and played a little bit. He had a lot of bootlegs. As a Dylan fan, he had a lot of Bob Dylan. And another portion of this collection that we purchased was a good collection of t-shirts, concert t-shirts, and mainly from the 1980s and 1990s. And there was over 200 shirts, and those basically looked pretty much like these albums that I don't think he wore them. So one thing we plan to do here in the near future is we will do a feature on those shirts, because again, we do get t-shirts in. We have some on the website. However, we don't really see or get a lot of stuff from the 80s or 90s, especially stuff that is actual concert shirts that were purchased at concerts. And I was told by his estate that he purchased all of his shirts at concerts. And from the stuff that I've gone through, I can attest to that. Very few that are just giving the name of the band and nothing else. So probably 95% of them are dated. They state which concert it was and where it was and the year. So that was another exciting part of this collection. The rest of it, there was a pretty decent CD collection as well. I think roughly 1,500 plus CDs, which for the most part were similar artists and genre music compared to what we're looking at right here. U2 was a favorite of his as well. Another thing that I noticed is that he had a lot of the Peel Sessions records, and many that I haven't seen before, so I'm not certain if he had the entire series of them, but I'm going to say that there was probably somewhere between 10 and 20 of them, and probably half of them were sealed and half of them were not sealed, or maybe there could be more that were not sealed. But usually with those we only see the same 3 or 4, so it's kind of interesting to see all these other smaller bands that issued during that series. He was a big Who fan as well. Quite a few bootlegs of the Who and the Stones and the Beatles.
And their various side projects and solo albums. Very much a super fan, super collector, and that's what we like to see come in with collections. Really, we like to see everything come through our doors because we're just music lovers, period. But the special stuff is definitely special.
When you buy record collections, you tend to see a lot of the same stuff come in because in the 70s or 80s, the big records, everyone had them. That's why they were big. And now we're getting into the blues stuff a little bit. Had a half decent amount of blues records.
Again, these are just the sealed copies. There's more open blues to come. So many of these things we can only ever find as modern reissues. So to find originals from the 80s is astounding.
There's a little bit of jazz, not a whole lot.
For sealed.
For sealed, yes. Well, in general as well, compared to the pop rock, it's a fairly small amount. He was a half decent reggae collector. He had some nice runs of Jimmy Cliff and you can see a lot of his Jimmy Cliff were sealed. And I remember he had a lot of Bob Marley records, of course, but he had a lot of Billy Preston. He was a big Billy Preston fan. Maybe that was something to do with him being a Beatles guy, played on a lot of Beatles records. This is some of the country. He didn't have very much in country. And this is some of the soundtracks. Some great 80s soundtracks that we never see included in here. Also some really good 80s soundtracks that had been opened as well, so this is just not all, again, these are only the sealed ones. So we were excited to see some of that interesting 80s music on soundtrack coming in finally.
It's a perfect example of how, as the 80s rolled on, some of these things on vinyl were taken more and more for granted.
And this last row is stuff that was some of the better stuff that was pulled recently. This is stuff we are going to be offering starting this weekend and upcoming weekends. And again, this is all sealed pieces. Original Iron Maidens.
We don't like to use the term Holy Grail too much, but a lot of stuff in this bin is 100% in that category.
Holy Grail, or what we call our A records, are basically records that we can't keep in, and they're sold before we can put them out, or as soon as we put them out, or we have people that leave us a list of stuff that they want, and it's at the top of many people's lists.
Yeah, you saw that right. Those motor heads have never been opened. They're not reissues, they're originals.
Thanks for watching.
Just to be clear, that was just the sealed stuff that came with all of this. Stay tuned, folks.